Hi there, my name is Jason Kelty. I am the owner and operator of Let My People Know Ministry here on Facebook and on YouTube as well. The YouTube ministry started several years ago, and it was really the Facebook ministry that really started going somewhat viral, if you will. That was a year and a half, 2 years ago, something like that. So if you're familiar with this here page, I am quite amazed that God has brought these kind of numbers to me as of today, and it just grows every day. It gets higher. So hello to all of you, and I'm very happy to have you here. This video is going to be, I'm going to create again my original video. When I started the ministry on YouTube several years ago, one of the first videos I made was on Genesis 1. I made 1 through 11, all 11 chapters. And I was very new to making videos, and that was several years ago, and so I wanted to kind of recreate these videos and get a second crack at them. I went through what I taught in well, I'm starting with Genesis 1 here. So I went through what I taught in that first video, and there's really nothing changed in my view. Everything that I believe, I still believe today, but there might be a little extra fine-tuning to what I teach now several years later. So instead of just uploading that old video to Facebook, I wanted to make a new video and just do it over again. Now, in the future, now that I've got this new little setup, I got my camera and blah, 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 I'm kind of behind the times on technology. I don't do things on cell phones. I do them on a computer, the way you should do it. So I will eventually be making videos where I go through exposition using this website here, blueletterbible.org. This is a fantastic website that gives you the ability to look at the words in the original Hebrew and gives you some Strong's definitions and stuff like that. Not that I'm a huge fan of Strong's, but it's a great website. Now, unfortunately, I will not be using this website today. As far as I know, I don't expect to use this website, but you can expect it in the future. Because today, I already have the script from what I did years ago, and I'm just going to basically read that same script again. But I've edited it. I've changed the script slightly, added a few things, and edited a little bit stuff here and there. So I'm just going to read through this, and hopefully you follow along, and I might have a visual aid or two once we get to that point. So let's go through Genesis chapter 1. Creation is a very, very big part of my testimony and my ministry because of it. I might be getting ahead of myself in what I'm about to say in the script, but when I came to the Lord, which was back in 2003, but it actually started in 2001, I was a full-fledged atheist. I thought for sure that there was no supernatural nothing, there was no God, there was just Darwinian evolution and all of that stuff, and that explained where humanity came from. And so I was confronted by young Earth creationism, and I'm no dummy. I have a higher intellect than maybe the average person, and I was not able to refute scientifically the arguments of young Earth creationism. So I left my atheism behind, realized that scientifically there has to be a creator, and years later I ended up landing on the Bible as being true. And then there's a whole load of reasons beyond that of why I believe the Bible is true, and that's a whole different playlist of videos. Bible codes are good, archaeology is good, fulfilled prophecies is good, But creation is the topic at hand here. So because I came to the Lord through creationism, this is very near and dear to my heart. So let's get into it. I wasn't much interested in history classes in school. Were you? Probably not. But when I became a Christian and learned that the true history of the earth is much different than I was taught in school, it somehow became more interesting to study and learn the relatively short history that got us to where we are today. I guess you could say I became an amateur historian of sorts, but I filter everything through a biblical perspective. That's especially important when you consider that the Bible's prophecies about the end have had roughly 6,000 years of history leading us to that end. Therefore, knowing history and understanding what it will all lead to gives a person extra wisdom. History is generally organized chronologically. So I think I'll start at the beginning, which was roughly 6,000 years ago. Where does that crazy idea come from? It comes from adding up the genealogies and the reigns of kings from Adam to Jesus. And empirical science actually supports this crazy young earth idea if you're willing to study it. I feel the need to go off script right now, and I'm going to go to, let's see, let me find this. This is on the videos tab of the ministry page here, and of course, you know, I'll be uploading this to YouTube as well, and I try to mirror the Facebook ministry and the playlists that are on both YouTube and on Facebook. I try to mirror them to be roughly the same. So if I say something about Facebook, then hopefully it's the same on YouTube. But the playlists are the way to go as far as navigating the ministry here. Saganism. This is a word I made up. It's my term that I coined, and I take full credit and blame for this word. So when people go, Saganism, what's that? I've never heard of that. Well, yeah, that's true, because I'm the one that made it up. I hope it takes hold, but there's the word Darwinism. Everybody knows what that word means when it's referring to the theory of evolution. It basically started with the concept of Darwin. So everybody knows what a Darwinist is and what Darwinism is. So when it comes to the belief in billions of years, there's really no word for that. So I came up with Saganism, named after Carl Sagan, because I remember in my childhood, I am 50 years old, by the way. I know that some of you might look at me and think, he looks like he's still in his 20s. That can be a blessing and a curse. But in my childhood, I was born in 71, and there was a TV show on public access television called Cosmos, with the wonderful atheist astronomer Carl Sagan. And I remember vividly in my childhood him always saying billions and billions of years ago. So that prompted me to think, well, he was the billions of years guy. And of course, you know, you might look at Dawkins today, or whoever is the leading atheists out there. But for me, it was Carl Sagan, who was really about the idea of billions of years. Now, if you really look at the history of where the belief in billions of years came from, it really kind of started with the geology that started coming around in the 1600s, 1700s, and into the 1800s. And there was a particular guy named Charles Lyell who came before Charles Darwin. And it was Charles Lyell's book, I believe it was called Principles of Geology, who Charles Darwin read that book. And that's what led to Charles Darwin believing or getting into his beliefs of Darwinism and all of that. So this belief in Saganism is very foundational to Darwinism and to the opposite belief of creation. So there's a playlist all for Saganism and refuting it. There's that number 62 right there, means there's 62 videos on this playlist that are just devoted pretty much to the idea, or at least they include the idea of proving that the planet, that this creation is not billions of years old. It cannot be billions of years old. It cannot be millions of years old. The science actually shows that it can only be thousands of years old. So I implore you, look at this playlist. If you're still conned into this idea that the world has to be billions of years old or millions, science refutes it. So there's that. Carbon dating does not prove anything. I'll get into that. Noah's flood is proven. Dinosaurs explained. Atheism, there has to be a God. Okay, and then there's some other stuff that's not related to creation topic right here. Getting down towards the bottom. There is archaeological proof, which some of that is creation related, but not exactly. And then there's this. The first playlist I ever made was all of these videos, which are basically focused on. I originally had all of my creation stuff, all the Saganism stuff and the carbon dating, and it was all on this video. But the playlist was way over 200 videos, and that's a lot of videos for one playlist. So I split them up into the different topical playlists. So here's the one on creation, specifically about Darwinism refuted. And there's still a lot of videos out there because there's a lot of proof against Darwinism. So you got to look at these playlists and learn the teachings. All right. Getting back to the little script here. History is generally organized chronologically, so I think I'll start at the beginning. Where does it come from? I already read all that. And empirical science actually supports this crazy young Earth idea if you're willing to study it. Okay? When I was an atheist, back in the year 2000, let's say, when I was an atheist, I was sure about my beliefs, and I remember a specific debate that I had among several friends, and I thought I was creaming them because none of them could defend their belief in a God. But I was willing to look at the evidence. None of those people in that debate gave me any sort of scientific evidence or of anything. Once I looked at the evidence, as in the teachings of young Earth creationism, Kent Hovind, Ken Ham, etc., all of the creationist ministries that are out there, then I actually looked at the science. Okay, so you got to look at these videos with an honest intellect. Okay, unfortunately, over the years, since that time, because this was 2001, January of 2001, when I first watched those videos. So over that time, the internet has grown, and there's been lots and lots of the atheist community out there that have dreamed up all of their supposed refutations of all of Kent Hovind's arguments or Ken Ham's arguments, etc. So you got to weed through that stuff because none of their arguments are good. They've just dreamed up all sorts of, we don't believe it because of this ideas. It takes a lot more faith to be an atheist, to be a Darwinist, than it does to be a biblical Christian. Okay, so let's move on and actually get into Genesis, right? Genesis 1:1. In the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth. I've just started my chronological walk through history, and I bet I've already got people disagreeing with that one sentence. Back in my 20s, I would have scoffed at that sentence too, mainly because everyone has been taught the Big Bang Theory and Darwin's theory of evolution as if they've both been scientifically proven to be factual. But guess what? Both those theories can be scientifically proven to be impossible. I didn't think so at first either, but I listened to the evidence of young Earth creationism, and it was proven to me. The question of mankind's origin is probably the most fundamental question ever asked. There's only two possible answers, creator or no creator. Evolutionists ultimately try to explain how mankind's origin can be possible without some kind of supernatural creator. Their theory can't be scientifically proven by way of laboratory experiments. No laboratory is large enough to reproduce another Big Bang. Instead of God creating things by simply speaking them into existence, they dream of another possibility that doesn't require a creator. Then they dig up bones and look at rock layers and dream up ways that the bones and rocks can fit into their godless dream. Meanwhile, a biblical Christian will look at the same bones and rocks and see how they fit in with the Noah's flood story just fine. What this means is that any evidence in the whole creationism debate is usually subject to presuppositional interpretation. And no, carbon dating doesn't prove anything. If you think it does, you don't understand how it supposedly works yet and what's wrong with it. Again, those playlists I showed you, I'm glossing over it in this paragraph up here. Those playlists show you all the science why carbon dating doesn't exist. Got a playlist just on that. Okay, moving on. This verse, Genesis 1:1, this verse ultimately addresses the creation of time in the beginning, space, the heaven, and matter, the earth. Time did not exist before the creation. We can't understand this concept as mortal humans, but God exists in an eternal state not bound by time. This gives him the ability to know everything all at once. He knows what's going to happen in our future. There is no other God that has that ability. That's why he's God. All that exists at this point is an empty outer space, if you will, and the planet Earth in the middle of it. Yes, I believe the Earth was created as the center of the universe, but that doesn't mean it's the center of our solar system. Okay, and here's where I want to bring in a visual aid. What did it look like? Genesis 1:1, in the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth, and it looked like that. It just looked like nothing, black. You can't see anything. Why? Because there's no light yet. Okay? Now, I'm going to make that look a little different later. Okay, Genesis 1:2. And the earth was without form and void. And darkness was upon the face of the deep, and the Spirit of God moved upon the face of the waters. This is describing the earth as being completely covered with water, the deep, and having no continents yet, without form, and completely lifeless, void. Light didn't exist yet. If we could have witnessed this verse visually, everything would just be black still, even though there's a planet right in front of us. I didn't believe the earth, I believe the earth was smaller back then than it is today, but I don't want to get into that right now. It's called the expanding earth theory, and there's stuff on the internet about it, but not everything that's on the internet, YouTube, for example, is coming from a biblical perspective. So I don't think there's really good videos out there. But there is evidence that the earth has been growing larger. And I don't want to delve into that. We'll get into that Noah's flood. Okay. Just keep it in mind for later. I also believe the earth started rotating as God moved upon the face of the waters. I don't know if that's true or not. It could have just been rotating from its creation or not, but it just kind of makes sense. If God moved upon the face of the waters, maybe that's what started it spinning. I don't know. Nobody knows. Anyway, so going back to this, there's a planet right there, but you can't see it. How do I know? Because it's there. All right. Let's see. Genesis 1, verses 3 through 5. And God said, "Let there be light." And there was light. And God saw the light, that it was good. And God divided the light from the darkness. And God called the light day, and the darkness he called night. And the evening and the morning were the first day. So now light is created, and we can see the earth looking like a big ball of water. And let me show you that again. You already saw a glimpse of it, but there it is. Okay, now that's not necessarily the best color to use, but I don't have control over that. This program doesn't give me that control. This program that I'm using, it actually tracks earthquakes. That's what it's being used. That's what it's meant for. But I'm using it in a way to just show you a visual representation of the earth, right? And I can do clever little things like that. So that's just a big ball of water. Where's the dirt? It's under the water. It's inside this sphere. Okay. Big ball of water, but we can only see the one side of the earth. The other side is dark. Okay, and I can actually kind of do that too. Look at this. All right, that makes sense, right? Light is on one side and darkness is on the other side. Now, it's not black on this little thing that I got here, but I don't have control over that either. Okay, so that's what it looks like at this point. It's just a big ball of dirt, so to speak. It's not just dirt, but you know what I mean. It's a big ball of earth that's totally covered with water at this point in Scripture. So where is the light coming from then? The sun hasn't been created yet. It's coming from God himself, who was still upon the face of the waters. Revelation 22 verse 5 explains how God himself is the source of light without the need of a sun. So God was physically on one side of the earth, making it day on one side and night on the other side. Simple as that. Scripture really is very easy to understand if you just read it for what it says. As the earth completed its first rotation, that was the first day. Okay, it's one rotation. That was really quick in this program. I can slow it down. Okay. One rotation. That's all a day is. A day has nothing to do with the existence of a sun. I've got lots of people that are constantly, I field the comments on the Let My People Know ministry page, and plenty of people have said, how can there be a day without the sun? Because the sun isn't created until day 4. A measurement of a day is literally one rotation of the earth. One rotation, that's a day. It doesn't have anything to do if there's a sun there or not. So one rotation, that's day 1. Simple as that. Genesis 1, verse 6 through 8. And God said, let there be a firmament in the midst of the waters, and let it divide the waters from the waters. And God made the firmament, and divided the waters which were under the firmament from the waters which were above the firmament. And it was so, and God called the firmament heaven. And the evening and the morning were the second day. Okay, this word firmament. Ugh. These verses are describing the creation of our atmosphere. A firmament is an open expanse of space. It is not a dome over the planet, flat earthers. It is not a dome. The firmament is open space. Our air is part of the firmament. Outer space is part of the firmament. I'm getting off script. A firmament is an open expanse of space. God took some of the water and raised it way up to form a huge bubble surrounding the earth. So those of you flat earthers that want to say that there is a firm dome, this is what it's talking about. A huge bubble surrounding the earth. It's not a dome over a flat earth. It's a bubble surrounding the entire globe. Okay? And it was firm. It was solid at that point, but it came down at Noah's flood, so it doesn't exist anymore. Let me get back to the script. Forming a huge bubble surrounding the earth. This is generally known as the canopy theory, and we'll see it disappear later when Noah's flood happens. It must have been frozen while it was out there. In outer space, the temperature is going to be low enough, obviously, to freeze the water so that it would have been ice while it was out there. It filtered out UV or ultraviolet light, which is bad for us. UV light is what ages us quite a bit and gives us cancer and blah, blah, blah. It filtered out UV light and increased the Earth's air pressure. This explains why people were able to live much longer and grew much larger before the flood. Once the atmosphere was created, God gave it the name heaven, which is now technically another heaven. Genesis 1:1 said created the heaven, singular. The King James gets it right. The heaven, which there was only one at first, and the earth. Here, at this point, it's being divided from a singular heaven into two heavens. Now, there is our atmosphere, which is technically the first heaven, and the outer space outside of our atmosphere, which is the second heaven. And I'm kind of getting ahead of my script here. Once the atmosphere was created, God gave it the name heaven, which is now technically another heaven. Our atmosphere is the first heaven, even though it was created second. Outer space is the second heaven, but there is also a third heaven outside of this universe. That's the eternal realm where God dwells. That heaven, even though it's numbered as the third heaven, that heaven has always existed. Genesis 1, verse 9 and 10, and God said, let the waters under the heaven be gathered together unto one place. That's going to be the Pacific Ocean. And let the dry land appear, and it was so. And God called the dry land earth, and the gathering together of the waters he called seas, the Pacific. And God saw that it was good. The continents are now created, and the earth no longer, and the earth is there, and the earth is no longer without form. Okay, in Genesis 1:2, it said it was without form. That was because there was no continents yet. Now it has form. With the continents in place, there is now a form to the planet. That's what without form was talking about. It was one big continent at first. Now, I wish with this little doodad, I could give you a picture of, slow down, I wish I could give you a picture of all the continents on one side and the Pacific Ocean on the other side. I wish I could do that. But think of it this way. Look at that. That's half, I'm looking at half of the globe right there, and that's just about the whole Pacific Ocean. Okay, yeah, you see Australia here, you see some Antarctica here, you see America here, but for the most part, that's pretty much half the planet. Okay, and then the other half is pretty much everything else, with this big Atlantic Ocean split in the middle. Okay, so just imagine with the Americas up against Europe and Africa, and imagine that this Atlantic Ocean didn't exist yet, and everything was smushed up together. And it's, you know, I mean, I could probably go for hours on something like this, but I don't want to waste that much time. This is going to end up, this fits in there, etc. So there's some sort of way that everything fits together into just one big continent on one side and the Pacific Ocean on the other side. Now you got to make the Earth smaller for that to occur, and there's also all of this volcanic activity that has happened since then that makes it obscure to try and figure out how that could have worked. We don't know what it was like before all this volcanic activity happened. Okay, so it's difficult to understand this by looking at today's Earth, how it could have been originally. But I'm telling you what the Scriptures literally says. Okay, it's literally describing all the land. Where is it? Let the waters under the heaven be gathered unto one place, and let the dry land appear. And it was so. So it's describing a single continent, big continent on one side of the planet it would have been, and the Pacific on the other side. Where was I? One big continent at first. God sunk some of the land down and lifted some of the land up to form it. It basically covered one side of the earth while the other side was a smaller Pacific Ocean. Now, when we get into Noah's flood, Genesis 6 through 9, I think it's chapter 7, maybe 8, where I'll really get into this, and I'll show you something else too, the supposed age of the ocean floor that adds more to this whole concept. The Atlantic Ocean didn't exist yet. The days of Peleg is when the Atlantic Ocean opened up. That's for a different video later on. This is kind of like the Pangea theory, but not in the same way an evolutionist would teach. Okay, the evolutionist teaches the Pangea theory from a Big Bang, and it was the Earth was a big molten rock that eventually cooled down, and all of that stuff. And they also teach that the Earth was always the same size, which screws up their calculations. So the Pangea theory comes from a Darwinist mindset. I don't like using this word, but I don't have a better word for it. So it's kind of like Pangea, but from a biblical perspective, it's more understandable. Genesis 1, verse 11 through 13. And God said, "Let the earth bring forth grass, and the herb yielding seed, and the fruit tree yielding fruit after his kind, whose seed is in itself upon the earth." And it was so. And the earth brought forth grass, and herb yielding seed after his kind, and the tree yielding fruit, whose seed was in itself, after his kind. And God saw that it was good, and the evening and the morning were the third day. Plant life is created. The earth is no longer void of life. Genesis 1:2, without form and void. That's what void is talking about. Void simply means that there is nothing alive on the planet in Genesis 1:2. Now, there's life. It's just plant life so far, but there's life. And so now it's no longer void of life. It would make sense that God created mature adult trees with ripe fruit ready to be eaten by Adam and Eve instead of making them wait for months or years for seeds to sprout and grow. Duh. It doesn't make sense that God would make them wait, obviously. So the creation had to have been a fully mature creation already. If God is creating things by speaking them into existence, it's not real much of a stretch to believe that he created a fully grown tree instead of having to create a seed in the ground and waiting for years for it to finally grow to maturity. Genesis 1, verse 14 through 19. And God said, "Let there be lights in the firmament of the heaven to divide the day from the night, and let them be for signs and for seasons and for days and years, and let them be for lights in the firmament of the heaven to give light upon the earth." And it was so. And God made two great lights, the greater light to rule the day, that is obviously the sun. Believe it or not, there are some people who claim that is not talking about the sun. And the lesser light to rule the night, that is obviously the moon. He made the stars also. Oh, by the way, he just made the stars also. Trillions and trillions of stars. And God set them in the firmament of the heaven to give light upon the earth, and to rule over the day and over the night, and to divide the light from the darkness. And God saw that it was good. And the evening and the morning were the fourth day. This is important to understand. The sun, moon, and stars, i.e. the rest of the universe, weren't created until day 4. How could the plant life created on day 3 survive without the sun unless it was literally just one day later? This is why each day could not have been a long period of time. There are many things. There's the gap theory, and there's the day-age theory. The concept that each day is not a literal 24-hour day, but is instead 1,000 years. A day is like 1,000 years, so they use that to claim that each day of creation was actually 1,000 years long. But this refutes it, because it is not possible for plant life to exist for 1,000 years without the sun yet. Okay, so day-age theory doesn't make sense with what the scriptures are literally teaching. And neither does gap theory, but that's a whole different issue. I have a different video that's about the gap theory from a guy named Daniel Johnson that just recently uploaded that. Genesis 1 through 20 through 23. And God said, Let the waters bring forth abundantly the moving creature that hath life, and fowl that may fly above the earth in the open firmament of heaven. Okay, let's stop there for a second. Birds, fowl, birds fly in the firmament. Okay, the firmament is not a crystalline dome. It is not a solid thing, because birds fly in it. If birds are flying in it, it's obviously talking about the air, open expanse. Okay, so anybody out there that does not understand what the firmament means, and they are using it in a flat earth argument, this refutes it, right there. The fowl that may fly above the earth in the open firmament of heaven. And God created great whales, and every living creature that moveth, which the waters brought forth abundantly, after their kind, and every winged fowl after his kind. And God saw that it was good, and God blessed them, saying, Be fruitful, and multiply, and fill the waters in the seas, and let fowl multiply in the earth. And the evening and the morning were the 5th day. Evolutionists, or Darwinists, I started using the word Darwinists all the time instead of evolutionists. Darwinists believe birds evolved last, supposedly from dinosaurs, which makes 0 sense. God disagrees. He filled the water and air with life first. I find it fascinating that God specifically mentions the whale here. Darwinists claim that whales evolved from land animals, specifically cows, or cow-like animals. From land animals that went back into the ocean and lost their legs. Man, it just takes way more blind faith to believe in something like that. They have to say this because they are mammals. Whales are mammals. So because of that, they have to claim that it evolved from a land animal such as a cow. It's a stretch to believe such absurdity. Well, God actually created them before the land animals. So they claim that the cow came first and then went into the ocean and became a whale. But this is saying that the whale came first and then the cow is going to come on the next day. Genesis 1, verse 24 and 25, and God said, Let the earth bring forth the living creature after his kind, cattle and creeping thing, and beast of the earth after his kind. And it was so. And God made the beast of the earth after his kind, and cattle after their kind, and everything that creepeth upon the earth after his kind. And God saw that it was good. God created everything living on land here. Notice the word kind instead of species, which is a modern word. The diversity of every species in existence today has derived from those original kinds, like dog breeding. But dogs never stop being dogs. We never see anything change kinds. The word kind would be similar to either a family or a genus, Genus. Okay, it's not further down in their list where species is. Species would be more like a breed, like a Chihuahua or a Great Dane. That would be kind of like a species compared to a kind, which is just a dog. And wolves are dogs. What's the other ones? Hyenas are dogs, etc. Anything that's dog-like. Genesis 1:26, and God said, "Let us make man in our image, after our likeness, and let them have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the fowl of the air, and over the cattle, and over all the earth, and over every creeping thing that creepeth upon the earth." Okay, this is going to get a little controversial. Put your seatbelts on. God is speaking of a plurality of some kind when he uses the word our. Some teach this is a reference to the doctrine of the Trinity. But that's not the only possibility. I believe he's talking to the angelic realm. Angels were also created by God in a humanoid form, so in our image could also be referring to them. We know from Job 38 that the angels already existed before God created this planet. They sang at the foundations of the world, the foundations of the earth. And that the word for God, Elohim, is a plural word. I believe the angels were an active part of God creating everything. God spoke, and they did some of the work. I know that'll be controversial to just about everyone, but just keep it in mind as we go along. Whatever the case, it's important to always remember that we are created in the image of God. Many theological topics deal with this concept, such as murder. Killing any human being equals killing an image of God. Also notice that mankind is given total dominion or authority over the earth and all the animals. Genesis 1:27. So God created man in his own image. In the image of God created he him. Male and female created he them. Here we see the official creation of the first man. The name Adam literally means man. He is a perfect physical creation of God with no genetic defects. Eve doesn't get created until later that day. We'll see that in the next chapter. So he is still undivided upon being created. We see these major divisions happen many times throughout Scripture, where God uses a fork in the road to symbolize something. Cain and Abel, Hagar and Sarah, Ishmael and Isaac, Esau and Jacob, Israel and Judah, Jews and Christians, the tares and the wheat, the goats and the sheep, the foolish and the wise. Keep that in mind, a dichotomy sort of thing. There's a good and a bad. The symbolic nature of all of that stuff. Another word would be typology, type. Genesis 1:28 through 31, and God blessed them, and God said unto them, Be fruitful and multiply, and replenish the earth, and subdue it, and have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the fowl of the air, and over every living thing that moveth upon the earth. And God said, Behold, I have given you every herb bearing seed, which is upon the face of all the earth, and every tree, in the which is the fruit of a tree yielding seed. For you it shall be for meat, food. The word meat does not mean meat like we think today, where it's muscle from an animal. Okay, meat in this just means the word food. And to every beast of the earth, and to every fowl of the air, and to every thing that creepeth upon the earth, wherein there is life, I have given every green herb for meat. And it was so. And God saw everything that he had made, and behold, it was very good. And the evening and the morning were the sixth day. Verses 26 through 31 give an overall viewpoint of mankind's creation from the perspective of the 6-day creation week. Adam and Eve are created and given the command to populate the earth, to have authority over it, and to eat the fruits of the garden. They were vegetarians to begin with. All the animals were vegetarian too. The next chapter will go back in time to focus in on the events of day 6 in greater detail. They are not two separate creation events. Plenty of people have claimed that Genesis 1 is talking about the creation of a pre-Adamite civilization of some kind, man that existed, maybe Neanderthals or something like that. They've claimed that. And then Genesis 2 is a separate creation where Adam was actually created. That's not true. They're both telling the same story. This one is an overview of the general concept of the creation of man. And then Genesis 2 will look at the same creation in vivid detail. All right? In greater detail. But for now, the account of day 6 ends here, and we've reached the end of the chapter. Day 7 will begin chapter 2. And I am going to stop there. When I first made my video, I actually divided it a little bit differently. I went up to, where was it? I just came up to here right before the creation of man, and I stopped Genesis 1 video there, and then I included this in the Genesis 2 video. But I'm just going to do this based on chapters. So in the next video, we will start at the beginning of chapter 2, which is going to be day 7, and then we'll look at the focused-in story of the creation of Adam and Eve, and the naming of the animals and all of that stuff. All right, I hope that this was edifying for someone. I know that some of the stuff that I'm going to be teaching is controversial and different than anything that you've ever heard before. That doesn't necessarily make it wrong. Okay, so be a Berean with me if you don't know what I'm talking about there. Acts 17:11 talks about how the Bereans were more noble than those in Thessalonica because they listened to Paul with readiness of mind. They had an openness of their heart to give him the benefit of the doubt and to listen to him. And then they went and searched the scriptures to see if the things that Paul were teaching was true or not. Okay, and there is, of course, the scriptures are the number one authority. Everything goes based on whatever scripture says. Yes, I firmly believe that with every shred of my being. But there are other things that can help confirm stuff too. There is actual science, empirical science, testable, repeatable science type stuff, as opposed to historical science, which is what the Darwinists use for everything. Everything that they do is all this fake science type stuff known as historical science, where they dig up a bone and then they guess what it used to look like. They dig up one tooth and then guess what the entire animal looked like. So there's a lot of historical fake science in Darwinism, but there's plenty of empirical science, observational science. Empirical and observational are basically the same thing, that can go along with, that equals, I shouldn't say equals, that corroborates what Scripture says. Scripture says something, and empirical science always agrees with it. Let's put it that way. All right, I hope you enjoyed this, and we will see you for Genesis 2. God bless.